Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving deep into a really pivotal period in German history. We're talking about the journey from Ostpolitik to German reunification.
A really interesting time.
It is, and to help us understand it, we've got some fascinating source material lined up. We've got Dutch educational videos and documents,
Okay.
and they span from the 1960s right through to the 1990s.
Right.
So we're really going to try to get a grip on this period of incredible transformation for Germany and for the world. I mean, where do we even begin with a story this big?
Well, I think you have to start by looking at the global context. The world was a very different place back then. It was the height of the Cold War.
Right.
And it's hard to imagine now just how tense things were. I mean, take the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962.
Oh, yeah.
That was a real turning point.
Absolutely. The sources really drive home how close the world came to nuclear war.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty chilling when you think about it. But as you said, it was a turning point, and it kind of pushed both the U.S. and the USSR towards détente.
Right.
A period of, well, a bit less tension, at least.
Exactly. I think both sides were really starting to feel the strain of the Cold War by that point.
In what way?
Well, the Cold War was incredibly costly. I mean, we're talking about financial resources, but also in terms of, well, just human life.
Right, yeah.
The USSR in particular was struggling with a failing planned economy. People were facing shortages, basic goods,
Right.
while the government was just pouring resources into the arms race.
And it's in this context that Willy Brandt comes in with his Ostpolitik.
Right.
So this was a pretty bold move, right? To try to improve relations with East Germany and Eastern Europe.
It was. I mean, you have to remember that this was a huge departure from the previous West German policy. Adenauer's approach had been to basically isolate East Germany.
Right.
So Brandt comes along and says, look, we need to engage with the East. It's the only way forward.
But he was walking a bit of a tightrope, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he was trying to build these bridges with the East while also maintaining West Germany's very strong ties to the West.
Right. The U.S. and NATO.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a delicate balancing act for sure.
Did it work, though?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag.
Okay.
I mean, there were definitely some tangible improvements. For example, there were new agreements on travel and communication between East and West Germany.
Right, so more people could actually visit their relatives and stuff.
Exactly. And then there was Brandt's historic visit to Warsaw in 1970.
Oh, yes.
Where he knelt before the memorial to the victims of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Wow.
I mean, that gesture was incredibly powerful. It was a symbol of reconciliation.
Yeah.
A recognition of past wrongs.
You can just imagine how emotional that must have been. I mean, that's incredible imagery.
Yeah.
But despite these positive steps, right?
Yeah.
German reunification was still a long way off. I mean, Erich Honecker, the leader of East Germany, he was still committed to keeping Germany divided.
Right. He was. But the seeds of change had been planted. And while Ostpolitik did a lot to improve relations,
Yeah.
I think it was the arrival of a new leader in the Soviet Union that really accelerated the winds of change.
Mikhail Gorbachev.
Gorbachev, yeah. His reforms, known as Glasnost and Perestroika,
Right.
they had a profound impact, not just on the Soviet Union itself, but also on its satellite states.
And that includes East Germany.
Exactly.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly were Glasnost and Perestroika all about?
Well, Glasnost essentially meant openness. It was about increasing transparency in the Soviet system, allowing more freedom of speech.
Right. And Perestroika.
Perestroika meant restructuring, and this was really about reforming the Soviet economy, which was, well, it was incredibly inefficient and stagnant.
So, I mean, these were huge changes. What motivated Gorbachev to pursue them?
He knew that the Soviet Union was in deep trouble. The old ways simply weren't working. He recognized that reform was essential if the USSR was going to survive.
But that must have been an incredibly risky move for him.
It was. But he was willing to challenge the status quo, to take those risks in order to, well, save his country.
And those reforms, they sent shockwaves through the entire Eastern Bloc, right? Suddenly, countries like Poland and Hungary had a bit more breathing room. They could start pursuing their own reforms.
Exactly. And this terrified the East German government. They saw what was happening in these other countries.
Right.
And they knew their own grip on power was weakening. They tried to resist the tide, but it was a losing battle. And then 1989 came along, and things really started to heat up.
Right.
You had all this pressure building from every direction in East Germany. People were aware of the higher living standards in the West. You know, they could see it on TV, hear about it from relatives and
I mean, the
friends.
sources actually mention one German TV program
Oh, right.
that actually compared everyday life in East and West Germany.
Right.
And it showed this stark contrast, like everything from the size of their houses to the types of cars they could drive.
Yeah, and those images, they really had an impact. It wasn't just about material goods, though.
No.
It was about freedom, the
Maybe
opportunity to make your own choices.
live a better life. Yeah.
Exactly. And on top of that, you had the political reforms happening in other countries.
Poland, Hungary.
Yeah, exactly.
People saw that change was possible.
Exactly. It was like the Iron Curtain was starting to crumble. And then came the mass exodus of East Germans through Hungary to Austria.
Wow.
Thousands of people just risking everything to escape to the West. I mean, it was a desperate act,
Yeah.
but also a powerful symbol of just how much people wanted freedom.
It must have been a logistical nightmare for the East German government. I mean,
It was a turning point. They were losing their citizens, and their authority was being completely undermined.
and then you have the protests in Leipzig.
Right, those Monday demonstrations.
Yeah, they started small,
They did.
but they grew quickly.
And they showed just how determined people were to change their fate.
Yeah, those Monday demonstrations were really powerful. I mean, it shows that people weren't afraid anymore to speak out, to demand something better.
Right.
It's really inspiring how these peaceful protests contributed to the fall of the Berlin Wall.
They did. The pressure on the East German government, it just became too much.
Yeah,
And then on November 9th, 1989,
big day.
they made the announcement that changed everything.
Oh, yeah.
The opening of the Berlin Wall.
It was a moment of pure joy, wasn't it?
It was.
I mean, people were just pouring through the checkpoints.
celebrating.
Celebrating, yeah. The images are iconic, right? People chipping away at the wall, dancing on top of it. But amid all the euphoria,
Yeah.
there must have been this sense of uncertainty as well.
Oh, of course. And reunification wasn't just a party. It was a huge challenge. I mean, how do you merge two societies
Right.
that have been separated for over 40 years?
Completely different economic systems.
Yeah, different mentalities, different experiences.
Yeah, and the sources actually highlight some of those challenges. I mean, the economic disparities between East and West Germany, they were pretty significant, right?
Oh, they were huge.
A lot of those state-owned companies in the East, they just weren't viable in a capitalist system.
Right. That led to high unemployment,
Yeah.
social unrest.
Yeah, I've talked to people who lived through that period,
Yeah.
and they describe it as this time of both excitement and anxiety. It was a new beginning, but it was also a time of great uncertainty.
Exactly. And that process of integration, it's still ongoing today. It's a reminder that the legacy of division and reunification, it runs deep. And it continues to shape German society in all sorts of ways.
So we've gone from this policy, Ostpolitik, right, aimed at easing tensions during the Cold War to the fall of the Berlin Wall and this complex process of reunification. It's quite a story.
It really is. And it raises some interesting questions about the long-term impacts of such a momentous historical event.
It's amazing to think about, over 30 years since the Berlin Wall came down, but the effects of that division and then reunification are still being felt.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a German story, though, is it?
No.
I mean, the fall of the Berlin Wall, it had this huge impact on Europe as a whole.
The whole world.
Yeah, marked the end of the Cold War.
A new era.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about Germany's role in this new Europe?
Right.
How did reunification affect that push for European integration?
Well, I think it's important to remember that even before reunification, West Germany was already very involved in that whole project. I mean, they were a founding member of the European Economic Community.
Right, which became the EU.
Exactly. And they really saw European integration as this way to strengthen ties with the West and to promote peace and prosperity.
And it worked. I mean, West Germany's post-war economic recovery was incredible.
It was, yeah. They became this economic powerhouse.
Yeah.
A symbol of the success of the European project.
But of course, East Germany had a very different experience.
Here, they were part of the Soviet bloc, members
Yeah.
of Commun. Right.
Which was based on central planning, state control.
Yeah, a world away from the market-driven economies of Western Europe. So when Germany reunified, it brought these two very different systems together.
Right.
What kind of impact did that have on the European Union?
Well, there were definitely some concerns.
Like what?
Well, some people worried that a reunified Germany would become too powerful,
Right.
that they might try to, dominate Europe,
Yeah.
sort of hearkening back to to some darker times in their history.
Right. Understandable.
But German leaders at the time, people like Helmut Kohl,
Yeah.
they were very aware of these concerns, and they worked hard to reassure their partners.
How so?
Well, they emphasized their commitment to a unified Europe.
Working within the EU.
Exactly. They saw a strong, united Europe as being essential for peace and stability. And they were willing to make compromises.
Like what?
Well, like agreeing to adopt the euro.
The single European currency. Right. I mean, a lot of Germans were hesitant to give up the Deutschmark,
Yeah.
which was seen as a symbol of their economic strength.
Right. Makes sense.
But ultimately, they recognized that a shared currency was a crucial step towards deeper integration.
It's fascinating how Germany's role in Europe has changed over time.
It really has.
I mean, from a divided nation at the heart of the Cold War to becoming this leading advocate for European unity.
Yeah, quite a transformation.
It is, and it's still going on.
It is.
Germany's still a key player in the EU.
Absolutely. I mean, they're working to address all sorts of challenges.
Economic crises to the rise of populism.
Yeah, the whole range.
It's been an incredible journey.
It has.
I mean, from the Cold War to reunification and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that those events are still shaping our world.
They really are.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
It seems like it.
But hopefully we've given everyone some food for thought, right? This fascinating chapter in German history, how global events and political decisions and just individual actions can really shape the course of history.
That's true.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed exploring this with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel
Yes.
for more deep dives. And be sure to leave a comment below. Let us know what you think about the legacy of German reunification.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
We would. We'd love to get a discussion going down there. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.